Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Conversation With series this Tuesday at 11:30. It was a little bit of a different time. Thank you for joining us. And of course, obviously, the replay is always available and you can share, like it, and use it as you see fit. My name is Terrence Fox. I'm the head of innovation with iAdvise, and I'm pumped to talk with Adrian today. Punk rocker, author of Punk CX, How to Wow, and host of the Punk CX podcast. So make sure you subscribe and find them on Spotify or Apple, wherever you listen. But obviously, he's a leading CX consultant for brands worldwide, and we have an awful lot to talk about. Before we dive in, if you're not aware, and if my over-caffeinated state and jittery excitement isn't incredibly obvious already, iAdvise had a huge announcement last week. And it was during our Conversation 2020 event. It is focused on unlocking the power of human and AI collaboration to scale the customer experience, but without sacrificing quality. Our augmented intelligence tool set was announced last week by Julien Horvouet, and it's the talk of the town, to say the least. Probably important to note why I joined this company quickly also, and I'll do my 3 minutes on the soapbox before Fritz pulls me off. I joined the company 3 years ago, candidly, because the vision addresses a pain I feel frequently as a consumer, and humanizing the digital experience at scale has been the vision. But as a consumer, buying online is difficult, right? There's thousands of products to choose from, and more often than not, the PDPs, the product detail pages, are without the information I need in order to make my purchase and have the reassurance and actually drive to conversion. And then when they don't have the information I need on the site, too frequently I'm pinned against AI with no human escalation, like a chatbot on the site, a human that is unable to answer my questions and or help me find the right fit. For example, I have very weird feet, and buying shoes is usually a 3 or 4 return process. Or even worse, lastly, is there's no way of engaging with the brand at all as a consumer, besides maybe email or call. And if you're relying on me, a new website visitor with no loyalty to you, to make the effort to email or call you, it's likely not going to happen. So iAdvise, of course, is focused around messaging, and it has over 5 billion monthly active users of messaging today. When I show up as a consumer, I want to speak to a human. I want them really to do 2 things. One is, of course, show up and respond promptly on my preferred medium. And then secondly, I want that human to be matched to my unique need and, of course, provide the product reassurance I need and expertise I need to feel confident about my purchase. So doing that for each visitor is, of course, difficult. And if we take a step back and look at COVID, we've seen increases in traffic of about 25% for a lot of our clients today. So scaling has seemed an insurmountable task. But what we have done, and I think many of you have seen Ed Billmeyer from Samsung spoke on this topic as it pertains to COVID and giving a 100% coverage rate. But we're helping brands deploy respondents that are matched to each visitor and where that visitor is in the customer journey. And these respondents are things like, of course, retail associates to provide localized advice. Hey, Paul, I'm down the road at your local Adidas. Come on by to pick up your new shoes. I have them in stock. It also includes in-house agents to handle support-related concerns. And then it also includes passionate, brand-vetted customers to deliver true product expertise. And Adrian and I were just talking about this a minute ago, but imagine buying running shoes for the first time to run your first marathon, right? Obviously, a lot to think about in the first place. How am I going to finish this marathon? But getting the right shoe for your foot, because every foot is different, isn't as cookie cutter as it can feel on the website. And oftentimes that leads to returns, issues, injury. But imagine being able to talk to a passionate, brand-vetted product expert, an athlete in that scenario that has run the Boston Marathon and can warn you that, hey, with your Achilles injuries in the past, I want to make sure you're in the right shoe. Here's that shoe for you. It's a much more elevated experience. And then the last respondent, of course, that we're helping deploy with our brands today is, of course, AI and bots for self-service and automation, right? If we can minimize human touch as much as possible for cost savings purposes, we should. But our new release further enhances our capacity to delight website visitors and care one-to-one for each visitor's unique need, no matter where they are in the customer journey. So I'll get off my soapbox now. I'm incredibly proud of the work our company has done in helping thousands of brands create a memorable experience for their consumers during this COVID crisis especially. And of course, what our major product advancements will do for them and their customers tomorrow. So before Fritz cuts me off, let's get to the meat and excitement of the day today. We have Adrian Swinscoe here to talk about today's consumers, their expectations, Q4, innovators, and everything else that might be bouncing around his and my brains. Adrian, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Terrence. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you for dealing with my little long ramble. It's great.
You're very welcome. I'm loving the sloth and the fox, man.
Yeah. Obviously, the blessing of having the last name Fox, I guess, is you get foxes constantly for every single gift. I had to remove some from this frame. There's another one up top. But yes, it's a blessing and a curse with having the last name. Adrian, to set the stage, I tried to dress appropriately in my punk gear today, but as a 32-year-old new father, I don't unfortunately have too much. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of like the thing. I think the important thing about punk, or being a punk, as it were, there's the fashion side of things, and then there's the music side of things, and then there's also just how you think and what you believe in and what you hold to be important. And I think the thing, you can be a punk without actually liking the music. You could suggest that punk is just about daring to be different and innovating. Yeah, it's a mindset, right? It's not a method. It's an approach. It's like an energy, and that's the thing that I love about the punk movement is that it's, if you like the music, it's a bonus, right? But actually, it's one of those social and cultural movements that, even though it's probably 50 years old, more than 50 years old, it still has an impact. It's still impacting the worlds that we live in. People can respect and understand the idea what it is to be a punk, and actually to do things kind of differently. Because, like you said in your title, you're head of innovation, right? Innovation is all about being a punk, right? And looking for that difference.
Yeah. So, Adrian, get me in your brain a little bit. What have you been reading these days? What are you excited to learn about? And you can't say How to Wow or Punk CX.
Right. So I've got a book which I haven't got with me, which is Malcolm Gladwell's new book called Talking to Strangers, which I've just started, and I'm really looking forward to that. I saw an interview with him where he was talking about it. I just love him as a writer and a thinker, and how he explores, almost like it comes up with counterintuitive sort of truths and insights. I think that's really nice. And then I just kind of went and grabbed one when I thought, well, actually, I might have a go at reading that again. And I don't know if you know this book. It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be, by Paul Arden. Now, he sadly has passed away, but it's sort of, it's like one of those books. It's like an adrenaline shot in the arm, and it's, the cover basically says everything that you need to know. Right, because it's all about learning, and it's about thinking, and about kind of trying to do kind of better and be better. And it's not really a self-help book; it's more of like a punch in the face. And so it's very like the Punk CX book. It's very kind of like graphic, kind of like heavy. Right. They use a lot of pictures and interesting fonts and things, and that was a lot of the inspiration behind some of the punk stuff. But it's a really cool book.
And so, Adrian, I want to ask too, and I love to ask this, especially to someone like yourself, who's a CX consultant for brands worldwide, and obviously a thought leader in the space. Tell me about a consumer experience you had lately that you were particularly happy with or dissatisfied with, and why.
Well, I'll tell you about one that just happened last week. And it was a friend of mine. It was his 50th birthday, and I was scratching my head. And I got in touch with his wife and said, "What would you like?" And she was like, "Well, you could get him some running gear or whatever," because he'd always kind of use running gear, particularly long sleeve tops. It's the winter's coming, sort of thing. Right. And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, because he's like one of my best friends, and I know him really well. And I was just searching around, and I found this thing. Because he's a big fan. We both like football, like soccer in your parlance, as it were.
Yes.
And he's like a Huddersfield Town fan. And I was able to find somebody that could, on demand, compile the story of Huddersfield Town Football Club via newspaper, kind of like pages from 1920 onwards. And I basically commissioned a book, which is like A3 size, so it's quite big, leather covered, and it's basically got printed pages of newspapers from 1920 all the way through to basically the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and everything that the sports pages kind of said, or samples of what the sports pages said that included Huddersfield Town. And that was a beautiful thing because it showed how much choice and variety is out there. I was disappointed because his birthday was going to be on is on Friday, or was on Friday rather, but I found out, I thought it was a perfect thing. So it was okay that they said our estimated delivery was going to be on Thursday, i.e. this Thursday coming. So I'd have to give it to him afterwards. But actually, no, so his birthday was on Saturday, but actually I was expecting to take delivery kind of like this week, and then I'll go around and hand it to him. But surprisingly, it just showed up. In fact, both things I got for him just showed up on Saturday morning, and I was a bit like... magic. And so they beat their estimated arrival kind of date. And is that special? Yeah, it's special because it was in the moment special. Kind of like for me. And it was a combination of did they know? No, they didn't. It just kind of, it was like happenstance, right? They just got something to me quicker than its estimated arrival. And you know what? That just worked out so sweetly for me.
And you think about the significance of the event, what you're trying to do in the moment, and you're surprising your friend with a birthday present, to under-promise and over-deliver in that space. That's impactful for you.
Oh, no, completely. Now, I always kind of like say that it actually, the science kind of shows that you should make promises and then keep them. Actually, there's a diminishing return to over-delivering on your promises. Because customers actually don't, there's a diminishing return to the value that they ascribe to over delivery. And actually they just want people to keep their promises. But in this case, I'm a bit like, I'll take it, right? Because it was like, they didn't know, but it was like, hey, it happened, and I didn't have to do the kind of give it to them again and try and explain it. I've got something for you. I'll have to give it to you later. But it was a case of, here you go. Happy birthday.
Yeah, so as someone who has had the latter happen to me all too frequently, I would like to go back in time and have that better experience that you had. So I definitely think that without meaning to, of course, they've tapped into something that was of benefit for you and will make them a bit more sticky, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I will totally talk about them. And I would have talked about them before, but I will talk about them more because of the whole experience.
Well, so Adrian, let me get to something that I'm excited to ask you. And in full transparency with everyone listening, when discussing the topics that we should discuss today with Adrian, we just kind of started shooting the shit and went from there. And I apologize for using an expletive, but I love your idea of the punk mindset is, everyone's a punk, right? If they have the appropriate mindset is a better way of saying it. What would you say, Adrian, some of the punks, the innovators today are adopting, and how are they adopting it in the context of COVID and prepping for it? So, and again, full transparency, I'm putting Adrian on the spot. I'm asking him something that I didn't give many prep time for, but.
So I think the thing that I see that is that really stands out is where people are doing things so quickly that whereas normally it would have taken them years to do, they've just kind of got done in kind of like weeks. And it's almost like what they say, necessity is the mother of all invention, right? I think that's the old saying. But actually, it's that the constraint in terms of the constraint of time and customer need has been extraneously kind of placed on many kind of brands, and they've had to respond. Like a fun story. Do you know that the guy? I've got some posters over here, which is the about Dr. Seuss cartoons on the wall sort of thing. I'm a big fan of Dr. Seuss. And do you know that the author of Dr. Seuss, which I forget his name right now, made a bet when he was in the process of writing, or he was thinking about writing another book with his publisher, that he couldn't write a best-selling book with 50 words or less. So then he went and wrote Green Eggs and Ham.
Right, I did hear that.
And it's now sold over 200 million copies or something.
Right.
And it's that whole thing around sometimes constraints drive creativity. Now, some organizations place constraints on themselves and it forces them to do kind of interesting kind of things because they have to operate within those kind of bounds. I think what this pandemic and the virus has done is forced people, put constraints on brands, and it's forced them to do things. So some have responded really well, and some are still slow because they're getting caught in their own, chasing their tail, as it were, thinking about it. But in that, I think, you've got people that have been doing things really, really well, but then there's also people that have actually taken a step back and actually thought, what is the best way for us to respond to this? And it might be the case of being, if you like, throwing off kind of some of their metrics, as it were, and how they operationalize kind of things, because they realize that they need to be a bit more empathetic with their employees and their customers and everything else, because that's the important thing. That's kind of what companies doing, what the conditions require kind of right now. And I think it's, and also the other ones are like people that just get the basics right. And in fact, they're brilliant at the basics. And there's not many of them, but they're just, they take the basics and they go smash out of the park. And they've been there all along. The secret's hiding in plain sight. Right. And yet few people kind of actually copy kind of their approach.
I was talking with Colin Shaw a few weeks back, and he was talking about the basics, and he used Apple as an example. You order something from Apple, you're likely going to find out that it's 5 stops away, and you're constantly updated on the status of your order. And little things like that, of course, go a long way. Just sharpening and making the delivery of your product as punctual as possible.
But I think the thing is also, you can look at it and go, you talk about Apple, you talk about Amazon, talk about other kind of leaders in the space. So the examples that we all that have been there for the longest time. Right. And I think the thing of what they also know is, for the basics for them is like a limited sort of choice. They understand that they will kind of do better if they concentrate on being great at a few things rather than average at a lot. But they also understand, because you can go look at those different brands and go, how many channels do they serve their brands, their customers over? And it's probably, you can count them on one hand, the number of channels, and they're just brilliant at those channels. Right. But the other thing that they also kind of understand is that because we all know this, is that people will travel for and pay more for better service and a better experience. And we know this kind of instinctively. We know this works in the physical world, right? But what we tend to forget is that it also works in the digital world. And we will travel digitally to a brand kind of if we know we're going to get the better service and better experience.
And Adrian, you talk a lot about, so I mentioned earlier, you have a Punk CX podcast. Yeah. Naturally, Adrian is the host of that podcast. So everyone make sure, of course, you check them out on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. But you talk a lot about injecting empathy as a part of your customer service strategy. And when we were talking earlier, you mentioned, making sure that you have an empathetic framework for your CX.
I think musculature, Terrence.
Musculature, yes. Sorry. I'm sitting in a new chair, so my musculature is a little sloppy right now myself. But tell me a little bit more about that. What are you recommending or advising, or what do you see that you're happy to see?
So I think the thing that makes me think is that we're seeing a rising kind of need because many customers and also employees through this kind of last kind of few months and continue to be, they're under stress, they're anxious, and it can be maybe kind of troubled, as well.
I think that's a good word. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we've seen the need for the desire to be more empathetic in our interactions kind of with people. Now, empathy is sometimes easier for some people than it is for others. Some people are naturally more empathetic than others, but empathy can be learned. It's a skill, it's a capability, but it's something that it doesn't necessarily come to everybody naturally. And we default, when under pressure, we default to not being empathetic unless we can build up this capability. Now, what I was saying is that actually, if you can work that at an individual level, but if you want to scale that to an organizational level, you have to think about what I'm called building an empathetic musculature. Now, that means that you have to think about the capabilities and the training and the support that your people kind of have. You've got to think about the tools that enable them, and the systems and the processes and the technology that help them do their job. You also got to think about the design of the experiences and the deployment of the experiences that in the infrastructure that you're trying to use to enable these kind of interactions, these transactions. And so all of that, I think it fits into this kind of exoskeleton, I call it, and musculature sort of like system to make us more empathetic. Now, that doesn't mean to say that everybody needs to be touchy-feely or fluffy, all of the time, right? Because empathy could be, I'm just going to be straight and to the point because that's the most empathetic thing to do. Right. And so it's contextual. And it has to be relative to the service and experience that you want to deliver and the strategy in the positioning of your brand. But we need to think about it holistically, because if you think of it in piecemeal, and we think, oh, empathy just needs, I don't know, a set of training courses, then it becomes a tick box exercise. I think, oh, we've done that, and then move on.
Right.
And I say it's way more than that. It takes much more than that, and it's a combination of strategy, people, process, and technology.
So I talk a lot, Adrian, and whether or not you've heard me ramble, I'll have you just secretly say yes, even if you haven't.
Of course, avid subscriber.
Yeah, that's right. So I talk a lot about bridging the online to in-store experience and making sure, of course, that first engagement, if there's a need for it, is empathetic, is emotional, is human, right?
Sure.
Because as I mentioned in my, I'll call it a monologue to start today's session, there's far too much of a feeling of a brochure in the digital presence, right? You land on the site, you don't know what you need, you don't know what products are available. And then, of course, each site is configured differently. It's very easy to get lost in how you're engaging with the brand today. So a lot of what I'm focused on and interested in is how brands are having that empathetic connection, right? If they are. And you mentioned people, right? That people, that's a primary reason, but it's not, or primary means, but it's not just that simple checkbox. So I'd be keen to see or learn from you if you've seen something that served as a good example, or if you've been impressed with the empathetic connection by anyone in particular.
So I'm going to talk about my energy company because I was talking to them because it comes to mind.
On the spot. I'm sorry. On the spot.
No, it's fine. Because I was talking to somebody about this kind of yesterday, and it seems to kind of serve up as a good example. So my energy company is was set up by this couple. But they've set it up as a co-op, a collective, as it were. So it's owned by its customers, and it's 100% renewable energy. They take a very simple approach to things. It's competitive, but it's so it ticks all the boxes. So It's like not big corporate, sort of. It's for the customers, by the customers, as it were, and it's kind of like renewable kind of energy. So you're like going brilliant,
right?
But the reality with energy is that some people struggle, particularly in kind of the colder months, and there's such thing, we call it in the UK, fuel poverty. People can't afford to heat their homes, right? Because energy is kind of like too expensive, and they also realized that this was the onset of this was going to come sooner rather than later during the initial surge of the COVID pandemic, because people were getting furloughed or losing their job or whatever, and they wouldn't be able to, heat their homes or kind of turn on the lights or whatever, because strapped for cash.
Mm.
So what they did is they turned around and said, look, we're going to put together this this kind of, I don't know, like an alleviation fund, as it were, for the customers. And they said, we're going to do this. We're going to contribute to this as an organization. Now, as customers, if you want to contribute to that too, to help you out your fellow customers, then that's cool. That's cool too. Now, the thing that really struck me about that was they were exercising agency on my behalf.
Right.
And doing something that, given that how they were, that we would broadly kind of agree with, and if we wanted to participate as well, if we had the capacity to participate, that would be a good thing. So you feel good about something, and then doubly good about something because you can contribute and things. And I was a bit like, well, that completely fits in with this kind of like, it's very contextual sort of thing around, there's this massive need for a particular group of customers that they are kind of like related to, and I'm sort of related to as part of the same kind of group. And it's a bit like, well, some people are struggling kind of here, can we help out? And because that's a good thing to do. And I just thought that was just so clued in to what was going on, and not necessarily a hard thing to do, but it was both, they led it, but allowed people to contribute. And I just thought, yeah, you get it.
Right. And I mean, of course, that's that brand saliency, right? That's the sort of warming customer touch that brands are looking to have, right? To strike that up in yourself.
But it's not constructed. It's just kind of like, it's driven by going like, we're just going to do this because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
And if we get a wash on the back of like the brand, an uptick in the brand saliency, it's like going, oh, we didn't expect that, but nice to have, right?
Right.
Because it's all about it's part of their DNA. This is what we're here to do.
Now, Adrian, I'm already running out of time with you, so I do want to bother you about one more thing. You have mentioned a few times in your Forbes article that was published, I think, over the summer, the need for a conversational approach. The time is now. And you went on to talk about how while customers may engage with you through many different channels, they see you as one single organism, right? Uh-huh. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, it's something that just kind of like struck me kind of like, a number of times over the years. And it's like, if you think about it from a customer's perspective, sometimes they might search for something on your website.